Hello and welcome to this webinar. My name is Nick Harang, and this is my wife, Christy Harang, and we are really glad that you're joining us.
It's really fun for us that we get to co-host this webinar today because we both work from home and share office space, but we serve two different ministries. And so it's actually rare that we get to work together.
Yeah, normally she's through this wall in the other room and I'm here and we're changing the world just 10 feet apart. But here we are in the same room today and really glad that you're joining us. Again, I'm Nick and I work with Deeper Walk International.
And I work with THRIVEtoday.
And today you get to hear from the presidents of both of these ministries as they are going to share with you the 4 habits of joy-filled people.
So, as Nick said, our topic is the 4 habits of joy-filled people. And a lot of people think that joy is just sort of optional, that it's a nicety more than a necessity. And yet neuroscience has shown us that relational joy is actually crucial because it's the fuel that our brains are designed to run on.
Yeah, so today you'll get to hear from Marcus Warner with Deeper Walk and Chris Coursey of THRIVEtoday. And Marcus is going to share with you a brand new acrostic to help you remember these 4 habits that are going to change your life. And we'll also be giving away a couple copies of their brand new book that launches today. So that'll be a lot of fun.
So we want to go ahead and welcome our presenters, Chris Coursey and Marcus Warner. Welcome, you guys.
Hey, guys.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Yeah, this is fun. We don't do this often enough.
So I have the joy of working for and with Chris Coursey. So he's an ordained minister, a pastoral counselor, a published author, and an international speaker. And he and his wife, Jen, are the co-founders of THRIVEtoday, a ministry that trains people in the brain-based skills that we need in order to thrive in our lives and to make our relationships work better.
Yeah, and I work with Marcus Warner at Deeper Walk, and he's been the president there for 17 years now. He's a teacher, served as a senior pastor for a number of years, has written over a dozen books now, and has spoken for ministry and corporate groups around the world. So with that intro, Chris, Marcus, would you take us into the 4 habits of joy-filled people?
All right, we'll be happy to. So, Chris, we are... it gives people a little bit of background on this book, right? Part of what we wanted to do here is actually write a handy introduction to a lot of stuff you've been doing at THRIVEtoday for a long time. That is, you've got this 3-track system at Thrive for helping people build their resilience, grow their emotional maturity, emotional capacity. Can you just give us a brief overview of what happens at track 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this book because it does capture what we do at Thrive. Because in track 1, we really focus on building capacity with foundational skills like joy and rest. And then people who complete track 1 move up to track 2, where we focus on getting back to joy. So in track 2, we do a lot of return to joy stories, a lot of staying ourselves stories in upsets and negative emotions. And then track 3 is kind of the icing on the cake, which is learning solutions for pain. And we're all motivated to have solutions for our pain, right? So each track is very strategically designed. Lots of practice, Marcus. It's really a good time.
Yeah, so this is a nice introduction to that. I'm gonna share slides here to kind of walk people through what we're talking about. The point of this. So what we decided, this is the week of Cinco de Mayo that this webinar is coming out. So which is appropriate because the 4 habits that we're going to teach here are spelled the Spanish word casa, right? And the Spanish word casa comes from the fact that we're talking about we all have an inner world. And in that inner world, we either live in a fear house or a joy house. And part of the idea behind that comes from the neuroscience on fear and joy, right? That our brains can either run on joy, want to run on joy, but if they can't, they will settle for running on fear. Now, you were just telling before we started some statistics about, we live in a culture that's really struggling with a lot of anxiety. Mental health issues are at an all-time high. I want to help people understand the importance of this inner world and getting this house, recognizing what's going on here and building it properly.
Yeah, I just had heard a statistic today, Marcus, that about 46% of 14-year-olds are dealing with some really difficult, challenging mental health issues. And so people are feeling it across the board. And one of the things that happens in your brain is fear is easy to turn on and it's hard to turn off. That's why I really like this picture of our fear house and our joy house, because it's very easy for fear to get activated for the accelerator to get pressed, and our body's already reacting before we're even aware of it. And so the good news is, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Finish what you're saying.
Just the good news is that, we can train our brain to run on the fuel of joy. And Marcus, I think this is just one of those appealing topics that we're all really hungry for. What can I do to change my brain from running on fear to running on glad to be together joy?
Absolutely. And that's what we want to do here. We want to transform our inner world from a fear house into a joy house. And we're going to give you 4 habits for how to do that. And to lay this out, I notice in the background, you've also got your book, The Joy Switch. And I love the term joy switch. I often, when I teach, I put my hand on next to my ear over here and talk about the switch. And the switch goes off or the switch is on. And just to lay the foundation here for what creates problems for people, when our at the amygdala level of our brain function, when things get overwhelmed, Daniel Siegel talks about a window of tolerance that we all have. And that window of tolerance for some people means I can handle this much of an emotion and I'm okay. But what we want to do is grow that window of tolerance so that instead of only being able to handle this much of a stressful emotion, I can handle more and more of it without it overwhelming me. And the definition of something overwhelming me is that my switch goes off. And so part of this joy switch idea is this idea that there are 6 negative emotions that are related to this, right? We have 4 low energy emotions. We got 2 high energy emotions. So my amygdala can only send 3 signals. It's good, it's bad, it's scary. If it says good, my switch stays on, everything's fine. But it's these bad emotions and these scary emotions that get to us. So you want to unpack a little bit for them, the connection between the bad and the down level emotions and the scary and the up level emotions?
Yeah, we have this, as you said, Marcus, with this amygdala, which, in 1/10 of a second, it responds without asking our permission. So in 1/10 of a second, it's already deciding, can I fight this threat? Can I outrun it? Do I need to play dead? And then, of course, there's the fawn response where I become who I think you want me to be so you won't hurt me. And so in 1/10 of a second, our brain is reacting. And ultimately, what happens once it reacts is the big question of, can I manage what I'm feeling here? And so if I can manage what I'm feeling, then I can learn to quiet, I can learn to stay relational, I can still basically be myself. But if I can't manage what I'm feeling, then there's this cascade of things that start to happen. And sometimes I'm the last to know when I'm reacting, right? The people around me who live with me, they see it, they hear it, they feel it. But the goal is really why we wrote this book, is really to help people be able to manage what they feel, grow the good stuff, and stay their relational selves.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you may hear us throw around like this idea of sad emotions, right? These big 6 negative emotions. And just to lay the foundation here, a large part of this is that I end up in a fear house when I get these sad emotions triggered and I can't bounce back from them, when I'm stuck in them. So these emotions are you can think of as shame, sadness, disgust, and despair are low energy emotions. They're like stepping on the emotional brakes, right? And it just slows everything down. So that's shame and sadness, disgust and despair, and they slow us down. So what we need to do to bounce back from those is a little bit different than these high energy emotions of fear and anger. And so when I am afraid and when I am angry, it's like stepping on the accelerator of my body and the whole thing can really get going. So habit number 1, right, from turning a fear house into a joy house is the first thing we got to do is build a foundation. And so what we've actually done is combine the first 2 habits because they work together. And that is, we want to start with calming and appreciating. So help us understand, what's the connection between calming and appreciating? Why do we connect these things together?
Yeah, this is a really good combination, because appreciation, when we reflect on the good stuff, we remember the good stuff. What it does is it actually has a quieting effect on our body. And so, our nervous system and our body has to learn, how do I press the brakes so that I can slow down? And Marcus, this has been in the news a lot lately with a lot of research that people are continually discovering how it's during the quieting that, your skill practice actually sets in. It actually takes, it's like cement that dries. So it's when we quiet, the cement dries. The skills you've been learning actually take root as you rest. And I've heard you talk a lot about that, Marcus, in terms of lifting weights and how our muscles actually rebuild, right, when we're resting. So appreciation is one of the best, most effective ways to get us to a place where we can quiet. And so otherwise, sometimes we just try this cold start, Marcus, of just trying to quiet because I know I need a breather. And it can be hard to do, right? My mind won't stop racing. My body's tense, my breathing's shallow. So appreciating and quieting actually kind of grow that window of tolerance that Marcus was talking about, helps us be able to rest, breathe, relax, and ultimately be restored and refreshed.
All right. So the C and the A of CASA, right? We said CASA spells out what do I do to transform my fear house to my joy house. The C and the A is calming and appreciating. One of the reasons we pair these together is that you put them together, they create a joy workout, right? And the joy workout gives you high energy appreciation and low energy calming. And the idea is that they're sort of the healthy alternative to high energy anxiety and fear, fear and anger, and low energy depression, sadness, shame, and disgust. So what we want is, and the difference is relational. With those other ones, I get stuck feeling like I'm all alone in this. I'm isolated in this. I don't know how to deal with it. So let's break these apart a little bit, calming and appreciating. When it comes to calming, there's really two factors that we're looking at here. The first has to do with our body. And that is, I'm trying to calm my body. And what I mean by that, I know, Chris, you guys call shalom. I want my body to be in a state of shalom. So I'll ask you to expand on that in just a minute. The other part is rhythm. And rhythm has to do with, I need a break and I need a rhythm to my life that is dependable so that I have high energy moments and I have rest times. I've got to know that I'm going to have a relational rhythm in my life. So why don't you unpack a little bit for us what it means to shalom our bodies? What's that all about?
Yeah, shalom is this wonderful, rich Hebrew word that means often translated as peace, right? But what it really means, there's a lot of depth to this word. It means that everything is right where it needs to be. I liken it to my morning cup of coffee, Marcus. I just, and I've learned I like my coffee a certain way, certain strength. It's just right, So when you have that cup of coffee or that cup of tea, or you sit back after working on a project and just like that, you just savor it. It's like, you know what? This is just the way things are supposed to be. And it's so easy to lose our shalom. It's so easy to lose our peace, right? It doesn't take much. And so what we really bring home in this book is what are practical ways we can turn up the volume on our shalom and turn down the volume on the noise that tends to rob us of that shalom.
Yeah. So we, people who nurture a rhythm in their lives where they are practicing appreciation on a daily basis. And we've said this in other books before, but it's the idea that there's a difference between saying thank you, which is sort of a gratitude task. I've checked it off. Okay. Thank you for the coffee, and really appreciating it. Like actually you're having a physical reaction when you're in a place of appreciation. So the physical, we said there's a body and there's rhythm. The idea is that a physical reaction happens whenever we have good emotions or upsetting emotions. And so a big part of emotional regulation is actually, how do I regulate my body? And so there are exercises, 15-minute exercises that you've written throughout this book, right, that have to do with how do I get control of my body when these upsetting emotions are taking over. And that's what we're talking about. We use both calming and appreciating to get control of my body and my thought life once I have started to lose them to these upsetting emotions. You want to give us just an example of like an exercise, how you've seen this be effective?
Yeah, one of the ways that we kind of wove this practice through our book with the exercises to help people learn to experience shalom in their body is one of the things that we practice would be just taking some deep breaths, right? We breathe all the time. We don't even probably realize it when we're breathing. Maybe except unless you're just like me who accidentally inhaled cereal this morning and I had a hard time breathing, but I don't recommend that. But we don't even think about breathing. So when we actually take some nice deep breaths and we focus on just deep breaths, right? What it does is it helps to calm our body. And so the goal is that we learn peace as a habit, right? That's why I love this calming habit, Marcus, because we can train our brain to notice when we lose our peace and be quick to refresh and restore our peace. And that's something that as a family we practice daily, especially around, meals, reflecting on the day. we always pause to just notice, how does it feel to remember these things, right? How does shalom feel? How does joy feel? And so little bit of practice can actually go a long way. We just have to practice. That's why we put those exercises in this book.
No, it is a good thing. And I like my Stephanie Hinman, who's written a book called Building Bounce for Kids, and was my co-author on another book called Building Bounce. She when she teaches kids, I like how she does it. She calls it blow on the soup and smell the soup. And it's like, blow on the soup, cool it down, right? And the idea is to empty your lungs of the air, let it sit there for a second, and then you go, all right, smell it, and take it in. So it's taking the breathing exercises and making it fun, and what we find is anybody who teaches anything about getting control of your body almost always starts with getting control of your breathing. So we've got other exercises related to how this works and how you can begin to get control of your body. Because I find, I sometimes picture rubbing my arms as like just rubbing this tense emotion out of my body and getting my breathing under control. And that's the first step to helping me before I can go and tackling my thought life. And I think a lot of people skip the body and they're just trying to get their thoughts in order. And so it's an important thing to try to realize that when we're talking about calming, we're talking about mostly about your body and how to get your body back under control from these alarms that have gone off that now need to be quieted. So I think people are going to enjoy this. This might be a good time also to invite Nick and Christy to come back and tell us also a little bit more. We got something that you and Jen really put a lot of work into called the 28 Days of Joy Challenge, or 28 Days to Joy Challenge. So maybe you guys can fill us in on that a little bit. I'll stop sharing briefly.
Yeah, that is something that is very practical, and you can actually find it at a brand new website we created called 4habits.org. It's just the number 4habits.org. And right there at the top, you'll see a way to sign up for a 28 Days to Joy journey. And so that you'll get access to some printable calendars. And we've been using this at the dinner table at our family for the last 8 days. We're 8 days into our 28-day journey. And you'll also get a daily email with today's exercise as a reminder to help you develop this new habit.
You want to do the book?
Yeah, we can do that as well. Anything else you want to say about 28 Days to Joy? Or?
Just that it's a really great way to start practicing the things that we're talking about. The practices are simple, easy to implement, and a lot of fun to do with other people.
So I got a chance to interview you guys for a second here. So when did you first discover the importance of this in your own life? I mean, what was it that do you remember that aha moment when it was like, you know what, I think maybe this would be helpful?
I remember his aha moment.
You tell.
He was actually reading your book, Rare Leadership, Marcus. We were at a kid's recital, and Nick always has a book in his hand when he has a few minutes to himself, and he was reading, and he was just geeking out. He always geeks out on books, but this was different. I had never seen him respond to a book like this, and he's just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is what we've been missing. And I'm like, you got to tell me about what you're reading here.
Yep, that was something. And then from there, I discovered a book called Joy Starts Here with Chris Coursey as one of the authors. And it really took a deeper dive into this whole idea of joy and the science behind it. And it just gave so much explanatory power. Why am I drawn to people that are, positive and joyful and kind of lift my spirits? Like, well, because my brain is hungry for that joy. Why are some of the temptations I struggle with so tempting sometimes? I'm like, oh, that's pseudo joy. It's telling me I'm going to find some joy over here, but really I'm just going to find some pleasure and then feel worse later. So just that difference between pleasure and true joy, true satisfaction was a light bulb. And how joy is a relational concept, that we are designed to experience joy face to face with friends, family, community members, and even the face of our great God. So we could go on, but we're not the presenters on this webinar. So anyway, you asked the question. We had to share a little bit there.
Good.
Well, it's because we know you guys could be presenters. So.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Very much.
Well, we're not presenters today, but we are gift givers. We are wanting to give away a couple copies of Chris and Marcus's brand new book that is launching today. We'll tell you where to find that if you want to pick up a copy at the end of the webinar. But now we want to just find out, we're going to launch a poll. And so you'll see that poll here in just a second. And it's just going to ask the question of, have you been to one of our webinars before? This is a joint webinar between Thrive Today and Deeper Walk International. So maybe you've been to Thrive webinars before, but it's your first Deeper Walk webinar, or vice versa. Maybe you've been to both of them before, or maybe it's your very first time here. And if it's your first time here or not, it's fine. But we just want to say welcome, especially if it's your first time, you're just discovering us. We hope that you find something really helpful for you today.
Absolutely. We're so glad to have you here. We'll have you fill out that poll and then we'll close it. And based on the answers, we're going to be selecting a winner for a free copy of the new book.
Yeah, we'll announce that. You'll get an email if you're the lucky winner. So if you don't get that email, that means you actually have to buy the book. So you might just want to buy it anyway. And if you get a free one, give that away.
It's worth it, though. It's such a great read. So.
All right. Well, we'll keep this poll open for another few seconds, and then we'll turn it back over to you for the last 2 habits of joy-filled people.
All right, as we do that, let me pull this screen back up here. And
yeah, I was just going to mention, someone said they already had the book. If you get the free book, I highly recommend gifting it to somebody.
Yeah. Mother's Day is coming up, or, a pastor or leader, this might be an eye-opening thing for them, like it was for me. I was a pastor at a church, and when I discovered this, it just, helped me realize what was some of the things missing in my congregation. So, yeah. All right. Well, we're going to close the poll and hand it back over to you, Marcus.
All right. Appreciate it. So as I'm getting back here on this other part, Chris, one of the things that motivated you guys with Thrive and also in our book was Jen's story of transformation related. Is you want to, for people who haven't heard it before, you want to just walk them through that a little bit? Because I think it's really, helpful.
Yeah, Jen is like a living billboard for relational skills and for these 4 habits. Jen often shares her story freely and how she never really learned the skill of calming and quieting. And so her idea of resting was like grading calculus papers while watching a movie. Like she didn't know how to turn off her mind, and it just would, perpetually race, and it just wore her out. And she would end up just feeling exhausted. And where that road can go for a lot of people is that they end up with not only a lot of anxiety, but they end up with a lot of depression. And so when I met Jen, it was a good day for her to get out of bed. And that was where she was at. And now if you've met Jen or you meet her and you listen to her talk or teach, you would never know that this was even a struggle for her. Like, I forget that. I live with her, and she's so good at quieting and calming, and she's very proactive about it. And so just to see someone make that transformation is just been really remarkable. So it's fun to see how she lives our book here, Marcus.
Well, it is. And, having, I've only known Jen as a joy trainer, and it's really hard to picture that there was ever a time when that wasn't the way it was. But I know in my own life too, it's like even in my marriages where we first found it on my end was that just realized that there was a joy gap in between Brenda and I that I didn't understand, and we didn't know what was driving this stuff. And when we discovered Life Model, we discovered the Jim Wilder, the brain science stuff. It revolutionized the way that we started approaching our marriage, the problems we were trying to solve, change, all these things. So I know that was the impetus for us, was just working through things in our marriage. As a senior pastor, with all the pressures of the senior pastor, it often puts a lot of strain on the marriage for pastors, and that was not also our story too. So we're going to continue here talking about these 4 habits. So after the laying the foundation of calming and appreciating, the next habit is, you can think of as building the structure of our joy house. So what's going to give it shape? What's going to give it structure? And the strategy or the habit that does this is storytelling. Now, one of the reasons we landed on this is that this is so integral to the way that you do Thrive training. So can you tell us a little bit about the power of story and why you guys do so much storytelling over at Thrive?
Yeah, storytelling is a skill that's woven throughout all the training tracks. And, stories are one of the best ways to spread the good stuff. And so we all like a good story, right? We all like movies or songs, right? Those are stories. And so stories do many things, but one of the things it does is that it's a great way to share some joy. So if you're thinking about a joyful moment from a couple days ago, the way that you can spread that joy is by sharing your story. And the way that people learn to tell stories here is these stories include details, but they also include the emotions. And so, Marcus, you talked about the body early. So we learn to, what is it like in your body when you remember this joyful moment? And so these are stories They are not too long. We aim for under 5 minutes, but they pack a punch because we're opening the joy file in our brain and we're putting words to that while we remember it.
So we are going to walk people through this little model for storytelling. So we can't unpack all the stuff that's in the back. There's a ton of stuff in there, but one of them here is this idea of to tell an effective emotion story. We call them joy stories. And I noticed this. So what really hit me is I was doing a corporate training thing a few weeks ago. And, I use the technical term thing, when I go there. Anyway, we're at this event and we had them do some stories. And one of the things I noticed was that most of the stories that people told about their emotions ended with, and that's why I struggle with this emotion. Mm. And I found that really interesting because as we went through it the first time, people naturally, when they did their natural story on it was, well, here's a time I felt fear, and that's why I am such a fearful person. Or here's a time I felt shame, and that's why I struggle so much with shame. Now, that is what I found a typical way that people tell stories about their emotions. What we want to do is transform that and get people to tell stories about their emotions that have a different point to it than, and that's why I'm stuck, right? That's that. Yeah. If I'm constantly telling stories about why I'm stuck, it's going to keep me stuck. And so I need stories that show me, how do I go through with this emotion without being stuck in that emotion? So how do I act like myself? How do I recover or bounce back, return to joy from that emotion? Or if I didn't, was there a positive point I learned, right? Was there something I learned about that? So you want to walk us kind of through this a little bit, how you see this work?
Yeah. One of the really neat things about stories is, we are able to put words to these feelings. And so I love this step approach that's in our book, Marcus. I feel like this is one of the clearest methods of sharing stories that we've ever had before. And so I just love that, step is just looking at that setting. Where does the story take place, right? What's happening here? And then the trigger would be, what triggered that emotion? So what was happening that made you feel some of that joy or some of that sadness? And then specifically the E is emotion. So what are the emotions that you were experiencing here? Let's put some words to that, which, believe it or not, is kind of hard to do, right? When we're trying to put some words to these things.
Yeah, and we're also talking about what was happening in your body when you felt that emotion. Oh, yeah. We didn't separate that one out, but that we make a big point of saying, when you talk about your emotion, talk about how it affected your body.
That's good. And that leads us right to the point, right? So it's, what is it? How did you act like yourself, or how did you get back to joy from your upset? And, or what were some of those lessons that you learned? If you could have that redo, what would you do differently if you were to go back in time and do this again?
So our book's full of stories, right, that follow this and illustrate the model. And I know one of mine, maybe you can think of one of yours, but one of mine follow the model was, the setting is, I was at a restaurant with my wife and some friends. And I know it was a buffet, and I noticed that there was chocolate mousse on the buffet. I was going to get it for dessert. So the trigger was that when I went to get the chocolate mousse and I took my first bite, it turned out it wasn't chocolate mousse, it was liver pate. So that was the triggering event. It's like, I was like, bleh, I got this yucky taste in my mouth. And so the emotion that came out of that was disgust. It's like, I felt disgust that, I got liver pate when I was expecting chocolate mousse. I felt like vomiting. I was like, ugh, I just wanted to get that out of there. I could feel my guts tighten, as I was feeling this. And then I noticed the people at the table were snickering because they had all kind of picked up on what was happening. Like, yeah, you got the liver pate. You thought it was going to be something sweet, turned out to be sour. And that helped me realize this really is kind of a funny moment. And I was able to join in their laughter going, wouldn't you know it? It's like, and so it was like me. It was both like me to join them in their laughter at the event. And it was a way that they all helped me to return to joy. And then I was able to go back and actually get the actual chocolate mousse and not the liver pate to end the meal. So all ended happy. So that's an example of using the steps to tell a joy story of how I faced an emotion. And I don't know if you got an example you want to share, but that's
Well, I love our stories about playing baseball, and I really enjoyed yours. And reading and hearing your story actually reminded me of my baseball story. And my baseball story was just how I basically my senior year of high school, like coach's son was going to take my position, and just how I navigated that terrain. And the thing about these stories that we want to drive home is that, again, when you can think about it, use the step points and share the story, which is what we do in a lot of the exercises in the book. Like, what this does is this is also a way to spark some joy in your listeners. So as you share some of your stories, now I didn't have a liver pate example when I listened to Marcus's, but I could see him as you're sharing that story, Marcus. I could see it. You were painting the picture. I could feel it. I could feel some of that disgust. But I liked how, you shared that you were all laughing, and it ended up becoming a story to tell. So just the power of that story, and just inviting our friends today, like, you have stories. And so what Marcus and I are trying to do is just make this easy for you to share your stories, and then to watch what happens as you start to share your story with your friends, with your family, with your small group. Like, just stories are a very powerful thing.
And they do a couple of things that they do for our brains, right? Is that our brains are natural libraries that collect these things. And so what happens is the next time I feel disgust, the more of these stories that my brain already has on file that says, oh, I know how, my brain will immediately much more quickly go to, so I remember how it's like me to handle this. I remember how it's like me to navigate this emotion. So one of the things that collecting these stories and having multiple stories per each of the sad emotions does for us is it helps our brain expand the library of ways to handle that emotion well. And that is an important part of building our resilience, is building this library of stories. And that's why we've made it one of the 3 core habits for, building a joy house.
Yeah. And, Marcus, I also tell a lot of families and parents and small group leaders that hearing and sharing stories is one of the best ways you strengthen your brain's memory system. So if you want to improve your memory, then share stories and just make it a practice. And Marcus, I hope everyone will practice the exercises we put in this book so they can practice those stories.
Yeah, there's not very little is more joy bonding than sharing a series of joy stories, because the next person says, I've got one, and before you know it, everybody's joy is going up to another level. So it's pretty it's a good habit. So it brings us to our 4th habit of the CASA. So calming, appreciating, storytelling. This is like attacking toxic thinking, and this is the idea that, like, for example, I remember the first time I decided I'm not just going to be grateful that I have coffee. I'm going to actually appreciate this moment. And I went, oh, I love the smell of this coffee. And then the next thought I had was, and this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. And I remember that because what happened was there was this toxic thought sabotaged my attempts at appreciation. It's one of the reasons why when we do appreciation exercises, we always say there's one rule when it comes to an appreciation exercise, and that is you cannot use the word but. Like if I say to my wife, I really appreciated the way that you cleaned the kitchen today and it looks so nice. And then I say, but I wish you would do it more. What do they remember? They don't remember the appreciation. Right? They're going to remember the but. If she says to me, I'm so thankful that you took out the trash today without me having to ask, but, I wish that it's the same thing. It's like too many of us have developed habits of toxic thinking that are constantly robbing us of the joy that would be there. And it's the same way with memories, right? We might have memories that have some joy in them, yet we tell the story and we're telling the joyful story, but then we use the word but, go in a different direction, and we ended in a negative place. And we're like, oh, and that's why I, hate going to the lake to this day. And I'm like, we kind of want to learn to reframe these stories, keep those things in perspective, and make sure that when we're telling a joy story, that it really does end with joy.
And that's a great way, Marcus, if I could jump in, that really is an important point you make, because it can feel hard to change our brain from the fuel of maybe fear to joy. And so when we're used to focusing on what's wrong, the but comes into the sentence, right? Because our brain wants to be critical. And so the beauty of what you're saying here is that we can actually train ourselves to stay focused on the good stuff, to share the good stuff, even if it was a hard day, or even if you're in a conflict, you can still be able to highlight and savor the good stuff. And that's why we want to remove the but from these sentences, so that you're trying to grow the good stuff.
Yeah, there's so if we go through this toxic thing, we talk in here about Dr. Amen's anteater system a little bit. And this connects to these sad emotions. So I think, again, of like the switch on the side of my brain, I'll sometimes look at the switches here. There are 4 low energy emotions that get triggered, and there are 2 high energy emotions that get triggered. So those 4 low ones, that's the S and the S and the D and the D. It's the shame and the sadness, the despair and the disgust. And the 2 high energy emotions, that's when I get afraid and when there's anger. So what I need to do, what happens is that with a lot of times we think that my beliefs trigger my emotions, and that's often true, but it can be the other way around as well. And that is that sometimes I feel a familiar emotion, and so I start to feel shame or I start to feel sadness. And what will happen is that having that emotion will trigger the library. Right. And all of a sudden my brain starts opening up all these volumes in my head of times when I have felt this way and all the beliefs that it taught me about life. Like, I remember the rejection. I remember the pain. I remember, being sad like this and here and here and here. And my mind goes back to all the stories of being sad and all the beliefs of being sad taught me. And so what I find is that just as often as beliefs trigger emotions, our emotions trigger our beliefs. So what we're doing with this anteater illustration is the idea that when my emotions are triggering a belief, we call those automatic negative thoughts. That spells ant. That's from Dr. Daniel Amen. And the idea is I have to come up with a strategy for recognizing those thoughts and replacing them. And so it helps to get ahead of that. So like, next time I feel fear, for example, and I'm like, oh no, what if this happens? I don't know if I can handle that. And all the familiar thoughts that come when I feel anxiety, what I want to do is like, all right, well, let's write those thoughts down someplace and let's pre-think a strategy for replacing those thoughts so that the next time they come, I already know where I'm going to go in this battle for my mind. And so that's an example of one of the tools that we put here for how do we attack toxic thinking. And I like to bring it up because I know the way I was trained was that all negative emotions are rooted in beliefs. That's kind of how I was trained. And now I'm finding out actually it can be the other way around, that sometimes having a negative emotion can be what's triggering all of these other beliefs.
Yeah, and I'm glad we teased that out in the book, because I feel like a lot of us probably have some of those similar beliefs, Marcus. And so we were very purposeful about helping people understand the belief-driven emotions as well as the emotions that impact our beliefs. And, that's such an important habit. I was thinking about how, when we think about the good stuff, that active appreciation that we mentioned earlier, that can actually influence our DNA strands. And so thinking about good stuff can actually impact your DNA. But let's think about the automatic negative thoughts that you've mentioned as well. Like, our body also has reactions to having those negative thoughts. And so being able to catch it and change it is a very important skill, Marcus. And I'm glad this one made it into our 4 habits.
Yeah. And that's why I find that people who live joy-filled lives are very good at taking their thoughts captive, to use the biblical term. And you think about how much the Bible has to say about this, about renewing our minds, setting our minds on things above. Whatever is good and beautiful and pure and true and right, let's think on those things. The Bible does have a lot to say about this idea of taking thoughts captive, attacking the toxic thoughts and replacing them. And so it's not enough just to say, stop thinking that, stop thinking that. I need to actually have a new positive thought that I'm going to replace it with that can take me in another direction. So again, the beauty of this is not just understanding the concept, but that there are exercises here to practice these things. And I think that that's going to be a big help. So that's CASA. That's this transformation idea. Like, let's transform our house from a fear house into a joy house. But we did add one last thing here. This is the idea of being a lifelong habit builder. right? And that lifelong habit builder has to do with, once we have a joy house, let's fill it with good things. Let's furnish this house with all kinds of things. And this gets us to this concept of satisfaction and the difference between what is temporarily pleasurable and what is satisfying over a period of time. And one of the things that we found about joy-filled people is that they don't fill their lives with merely pleasurable experiences. They fill their lives with things that are truly satisfying. Can you help us tease out a little bit the difference here between those things and what's going on in the brain with them?
Yeah, satisfaction is a flower that grows in the garden of maturity. And so when you've been tending and cultivating maturity, one of the beautiful flowers that grows is that satisfaction, as Marcus shared. And so this is a sign of maturity. And I was just thinking, my children have been in the stage of learning satisfaction. And so one of the ways we help them, my wife and I help them learn satisfaction, is to review the day. What was satisfying from the day, but also what was not satisfying from the day. And when we kind of just give in to cravings and we want that pleasure, maybe I want to eat those dozen cookies from my favorite bakery. In the moment, it tastes really good. I get that sugar rush. But what happens is within 20 minutes, I'm ready for a nap and I feel miserable because my body didn't like that. So what we're learning with satisfaction is, how do we grow the good stuff that reflects our values? And how do we work toward the things that are really life-giving and meaningful and satisfying? And we can do that in some very practical ways that we talk about in the book. And this is a good thing to grow in our relational gardens, is finding what's satisfying in life.
So that's basically the overview of what we wanted to, people to appreciate and understand. I'm going to invite Nick and Christy to come back on. We had, as I've gone through here, more and more when I go places, the issue that people are asking for help with is resilience. In fact, I just had a medical center at a university ask, says, "We love your leadership stuff. Do you have something on emotional resilience that we can do?" And I was happy to be able to recommend them this book. I often tell people it's by the same publisher as The 5 Love Languages. It kind of fits that same niche. It's a book that you can give to somebody Christian or non-Christian, and it's going to be helpful to them. We didn't dive into a ton of the brain stuff, but we do unpack, like the oxytocin and dopamine and, things that are going on in the brain a little bit. So hopefully people will find this helpful and a tool that they can pass on to other people.
Yeah, guys, wow, just what great stuff. And we already got our copy of the book in the mail, so we're excited to be diving into that and doing the 28 Days to Joy exercises. So thank you guys for taking the time to put this all together in a book and sharing some of the highlights today.
Thank you. This is fun.
So we want to go ahead and share some resources for you guys. And Marcus was just mentioning the book that is out today officially. And I just want to say, if you don't have your copy, I highly recommend you grab one. If you're newer around here, this is going to go more into, they just do such a great job of outlining what joy is, why we need it, how we can build it into our lives. But this is also a fabulous, if you've been looking for a resource to get in the hands of someone else to help them understand what you are already buying into and seeing make a difference in your life, this book would be a really great resource to give to somebody else.
And mercifully, it's short.
Mm-hmm.
I picked up some books that had some valuable information. They were over 300 pages long, and I never finished them. This one's just not a whole lot more than 100 pages. It's pocket sized, so it's portable and something that people can dive right into and get a lot out of. And we've got it on sale. You can get it at both THRIVEtoday and you can get it at Deeper Walk International. And we've actually, I don't know if everybody knows this, but this is the third in a series. So the first book that came out was The 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriages. And that one's just got some incredible exercises and some practices that successful, joyful, strong marriages put into practice. And everybody can apply these in their marriage. And we've done this multiple times. We've led classes through it, and it's really strengthened us. Then there's The 4 Habits of Raising Joy-Filled Kids, which again is great for parents as well as grandparents that want to put a short readable book into the hands of their kids for their grandkids' sake, and friends, pastors, leaders. And then, of course, the book you've been hearing about today. You can get all three at a pretty good discount at either thrivetoday.org or at Deeper Walk International. And that's just on sale this week. So I encourage you to pick up a few copies for yourself or for others.
So hopefully you've been catching on to the idea that the way we build joy into our lives is by building skills. That's essentially CASA. These are skills: calming, appreciation, storytelling, attacking negative thoughts. And we've had actually some people in the chat saying, oh, is there someone here who wants to practice with me? Practice is how we develop these skills. It's how we build these things into our lives. And so, especially if you're looking for someone to practice with, if you want some support in starting to practice these skills, we have a summer habit builder group. This is an 8-week group that goes through Chris's Skill 1, Building Joy. It goes through his Joy online course. So it has exercises on how to build joy that a facilitator will lead you through each week. It provides a fabulous way to get a jump start in your joy, learn to start practicing these things, and build some community while you do it.
And you can find that if you just go to THRIVEtoday.org. Right there on the homepage, you'll see a link. This URL is down there as well. Mm-hmm. We'll put all the links that you heard about today, the books and the events and things like that. They'll come in an email tomorrow, along with the link to the recording. So you can revisit today's material. You can also pass it along to a friend and follow up with some of these things. And we are excited at Deeper Walk to be celebrating 35 years of ministry. Started in 1986 with a pastor named Mark Bubeck, and just has had an amazing impact on Christians and families, churches, communities around the world for 3.5 decades. So we're going to be gathering in Northwest Indiana, not too far from Chicago, so for those of you that need to fly in like we do. And we have Marcus, of course, will be speaking as our president, but we have the illustrious Chris Coursey as one of our primary presenters, as well as we gather there for a few days in person. So we hope that you can begin making plans now to join us in person. Online is wonderful because we've got people from Germany today joining us for this webinar and people from all over. But there's nothing like being able to be in the same room and get those hugs and high fives and that face-to-face joy. So it's worth the trip, not just for the messages you'll hear and the breakout sessions on topics that'll be really relevant, but also just to be together with your tribe. Be a lot of Thrive folks, a lot of Deeper Walk folks, and we hope you can join us for that. That you'll be able to sign up for that soon. I keep saying that. I'm the guy responsible to get that webpage together. It's coming. But save the date. And lastly, just want to mention, for those of you that want to get equipped in helping others experience freedom in Christ, helping others experience emotional healing from some of the wounds and the lies, the vows, the strongholds that the enemy has brought into people's lives, and to be able to take massive steps forward in their maturity, we have what we call a prayer ministry certification. And won't go into details now. You can just go to our website. Right at the top, you'll see one of the items you can click is the School of Ministry. We're actually accepting applications now for our next 9-month program, which begins in August. So there's only, I think, 6 or 7 spots left. We've only got 16 spots. We've already filled up 9 or 10. So if you're interested in joining us this August or in January, you want to put yourself on the list for next time around, go ahead and go to our website, go to the School of Ministry bar at the top, and let us know. So we also are going to do another book giveaway in a little bit, but I think we want to make sure we get to some Q&A first, and we'll do the book giveaway at the end. So Chris and Marcus, we've seen some questions coming in, and for those of you that haven't typed in your question, the best place to put it is in the Q&A window. You should see a little button for that, hopefully, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and ask this. I'll maybe ask Chris, what can you do if someone is stuck in their emotion and they can't see it? They continue to see you as the enemy and don't want to interact with you.
Yeah, that's such a good question of a hard dynamic. So this is where, what Marcus and I would say in the book is this is a really good practice at learning to stay our relational selves with someone that might not see, hear, or understand us, or might not understand our heart. So how do I stay relational? And how do I, catch my negative thoughts, right? Paying attention to my thoughts and how does this affect me? And even it's a good thing to talk to God about. And so it's, Lord, I'm losing my peace here. What do you see when you look at this person? Or what would you like me to know as you look at the situation? And even join Jesus in praying for that person. So staying ourselves, seeing some of what God sees, quieting, catching those automatic negative thoughts, and really trying to be a non-anxious presence. Good question.
I do think you can think about this in terms of past, present, and future too, and that is, how do I as I anticipate the next time, what am I going to do? Not only in that moment, but how am I going to bounce back from this? Having a game plan for recovering. Because when you're dealing with somebody who lives in enemy mode on a regular basis, there's probably nothing you can do to snap them out of that and make them change. So you're going to really have to focus on how do you maintain your own level of resilience and your own ability to recover. So when I say past, present, and future, I'm just thinking, what am I doing? How has this gone in the past? Is there healing that needs to take place? What is my battle strategy here in the present? And as I look toward the future, how do I plan for recovery as well?
Great, thanks.
That's great. Well, and Chris, I know at Thrive Training, you guys do teach a skill that we developed called 4+ storytelling. So someone asks, what's the difference between a step story and a 4+ story?
Actually, they're very similar. And so what Marcus and I tried to do is really simplify the 4+. So that's why I'm so excited about the step, because I feel like we are able to simplify some of what we do at Thrive. So it's really exciting to teach.
The idea here too, just building on that, is the 4+ is built off of the 5 brain levels, right? And that there are that we want to engage all 5 brain levels. So it emphasizes that. Whereas STEP emphasizes the process. And so they're actually the same thing, right? So a 4+ story and a STEP story, exactly the same thing. They're just emphasizing different things.
Great. Marcus, what about people who are single, widowers, widows? How would you encourage them to build the kind of relationships that help to strengthen joy, particularly if they live alone?
Yeah, that is hard. When you live alone, it becomes doubly important, one, that you do the calming and appreciating things on a regular basis just between you and God. But when you're looking for that external stuff, the pandemic was super hard on people, a lot of people related to this, because they lost that, and a lot of folks went into depression. And so the first step you want to do, and we don't really talk about this in the book that much, this would be from other sources, but it is is I want to identify the relationships that are currently in my life and look and ask myself a couple of questions. What can I do to add a little bit of joy to that relationship and just increase every relationship I have? If I can increase a little bit of joy in all of them, then the cumulative effect of that increases my overall joy. Also, it can helpful even to make I've heard Dr. Wilder talk about this, making like a chart that says, who do I see every day? Who do I see once a week? Who do I see once a month? And trying to break it down that way, and then be a little bit more intentional about how do I strengthen the relationships that already exist by adding a little bit more joy to those, as well as where can I find new people to connect with, which is what most of us think. A great place to start is to look into these habit things that Chris does, because those are done in online groups, and so you get a little bit of community there, or in the Journey Group program that Amy Brown has put together that Alive and Well runs.
Let me also mention that during the holidays, we did a connections bingo board, like a free gift to our audience. And we did a board specifically for people that didn't have a lot of community in their lives. And it has a bunch of different ideas. So if you email us either at Christy, KRISTY, at THRIVEtoday.org or info@THRIVEtoday.org asking about that, we can get you that PDF.
Good. I'll put her email in the chat right now. THRIVEtoday.org. All right. And MT, one of my students in our current school of ministry. Hey, MT, glad you could join us today. Chris, he asked this question. Any suggestions for using these habits in a recovery ministry that I'm launching next week? I'm considering opening with some quieting practices, but I'm nervous about trying something new.
Yeah, that's a great question. I always tell people, first, put your oxygen mask on you, and then you start sharing it with everyone else. And so, part of this would be practicing some of this in your own life, so it's familiar and you're comfortable with it. But the people that, many people that I've talked to that have added these into their groups, it's transformed their groups in many ways. But we always want to start with just you practicing this in your own life and start sharing what you're learning. Otherwise, if we don't practice it, it just becomes a whole different dynamic. So just practice. But definitely, this is some good spice that you can add to your group and just watch what grows and what happens.
Yeah, if I could jump on that too, because we talk about this quite a bit, in that too many recovery groups only focus on the negative. And when you get together, everybody just shares the worst thing that happened to them that week, or their worst failure, or the worst story, and you leave feeling more down than when you came. So we like to encourage people, tell appreciation stories to start things off. Tell appreciation stories to end things off, so that the whole experience isn't just, let me tell you about, the worst problem I had to deal with, and you leave feeling like you're carrying more weight than you came. So it can be a very big help to do this.
Awesome. All right, here's a question. I have a daughter who doesn't seem to be able to move past circumstances and falls back into victim mentality, but she always says she just wants to be happy and feel joy. So any suggestions on where to start? Chris, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I would, if she's open to it, even practicing some of these exercises with her. I mean, if the willingness is there, maybe the capacity is not. And so just as we start practicing the exercises, and growing some capacity, that's where we actually increase our ability to handle the hard stuff. And so motivated, if she's comfortable, I would actually practice those exercises, and maybe even invite others, whether a small group or somehow invite others into that to grow some joy.
I agree. I think helping people understand that growing joy is like working out, and everybody kind of understands, if I'm not happy with the way my body is, I'm going to do something about it, then exercise and diet go into that. We're looking at the same thing. When it comes to my emotional life, there are two things. It's either repair or resilience. And so repair, I tend to go to counseling and prayer ministry for. Resilience takes community and exercises. And so there's no shortcuts. You can't just wave a magic wand. There's a lot more I could say, but that's it.
Marcus, what about, someone was asking about satisfaction versus contentment. How would you delineate between those two?
Yeah, they're largely the same thing. I think that when I'm content, it means, now that I think about it, when I'm content, the idea is that I can be at peace regardless of what's going on in my life. So building a joy house in the inner world is a key component to learning how to live with contentment. So Paul says, I can be content whether things are good or whether they're bad. That means I can live in my internal joy house either way. Satisfaction has to do with, what can I think about with joy and pleasure multiple days after it's done? So it's like, if you Nick, you built that, the stuff behind you there. We're looking at this beautiful bookshelf on the back. You built that. My guess is you can revisit that with a sense of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And frustration, perhaps, but there was some.
There was a couple of those moments, but like you said, you want to focus on the good stuff.
Yeah. So you go back, and so satisfaction is the idea of doing things in our life that when I reflect back on it, I can revisit the joy and the sense of satisfaction that it had. Versus contentment is the moral idea of refinding my calm and my appreciation despite what's going on around me.
Good. All right. Well, we have time for one more question. Then we're going to do our last book giveaway before we try to wrap up here at the end of the hour. Chris, how much time or space should be given in a day to practice these rhythms?
Yeah, great question. I would say as much as you can throw at it. And most of us have full schedules, right? I have a busy life. And so for me, I try to maximize the evenings and maximize meals. So how can I take the best? How can I just maximize what I have to work with? We know Jim Wilder would say, if you can practice appreciation 3 times a day, right? At 5 to 10 minutes each time, just a little bit will go a long way, which for 30 days resets and recalibrates your nervous system for joy and peace. So, hey, if you have an hour a day, by all means, break it up into smaller pieces. If you have 15 minutes, just try to make work what you can. And if you can do it, you're going to get, more out of it, as long as you're doing it out of what you have to work with instead of what you don't have. So if you're tired, don't force it. Maybe you quiet for 10 minutes instead of doing something else. So just, work within the range of what you have available and just try to maximize that time. And ideally, if you can even practice with other people, that's even better.
Oh, that's so great. Well, we reached the end of the hour, and I wanted to ask if anyone had a birthday on May 2nd. if you did, we want to send you a birthday gift.
Which is today, in case you don't know.
Yeah.
But if it's your birthday, you probably know it. I hope you know it.
Yeah. And if maybe it's May 1st or May 3rd. So if you were May 2nd or within a couple of days, let me know. And the closest person, we'll put that book in the mail to you here real soon. I'm going to put this in the chat. Elizabeth Cagle, May 1st. We might have a winner. Might have a winner. So if your birthday is May 2nd, you can email support@deeperwalkinternational.org if you didn't have time to put that in the chat today. But Chris, Marcus, thank you so much for, again, taking the time to write this book together. We know it's a very long process, and I'm so glad that it's now out and it's a resource for people everywhere. So thank you guys so much.
Hey, thank you for leading us today, friends.
It's been fun, and we'll have to do another joint webinar here again, so I get to see my wife more often, because we're normally just so close and yet so far, the wall just kind of keeps things separate. But no, in all seriousness, thank you to everyone who was able to join us today, whether live or through the recording. And again, if you find this helpful, pass this on. You'll get an email tomorrow with the recording link, all the links to the things we've talked about. And just, if you think this might help someone, please forward that on to them so that they can grow these skills that are going to produce more joy in their lives and their family and their community as well. So,
yeah. Thanks for being with us, everyone. It's been great to spend some time with you.
All right. See you again.